So here we are, we're analyticizing and happily crunching our numbers all day. We're working with Tableau calculations and pivoting search data and all that fun stuff, right? We're like rolling around in it. And it's now presentation day, now that we're coming back to this finally. And you're just showering your stakeholders with your nuggets of wisdom. And you know you're just rocking it. Until you take a quick look around the room and you suddenly notice that you may not exactly have their undivided attention, right? Glazed eyeballs, little drool, little side multitasking, that's not so private looking, right? So, and you start to wonder, you're like, what is happening here? My numbers are awesome. And you start to wonder that, did my numbers actually have an impact at the end of this meeting? And by the end of it, you're starting to worry that all that hard work has flown into what I call the dreaded data black hole. Bye-bye. Does this sound familiar to anyone except me? Yes, okay, thank you. So I want to let you know that this is not just some story I pulled out of thin air. This is actually my story and the stories of the tens of thousands of data practitioners I have worked with and spoken to over the last 9 years. And there is something really going on here. I call it presentation zombification. These perfectly lucid, awake stakeholders walk into your conference room, and by the end, they are mindless, drooling, argumentative, debative, otherworldly non-humans that we don't recognize. This is a global affliction, and it's been happening ever since meetings were born. And if we want to talk about numbers for a second, because we care about data, this problem is very expensive. Doodle.com did a study several years ago of how much money is wasted, estimated to be wasted in business meetings in just the US and the UK, in just 2 countries. The estimate was $541 billion per year for just 2 countries. Now you extrapolate that out across this globe, and this is a very expensive and painful problem. Expensive for the people presenting because this is emotionally challenging. Expensive for the organizations because this is a huge amount of waste. So what do we do about this? Well, here's the other stat that's important to understand. Companies are getting wise that these are critical skills for doing business well. Forrester predicted that 25% of new hires and promotions would require data storytelling skills, specifically, a quarter. So this is a skill set that if we don't have it now, this is the time to act and start eliminating that zombification. As you know, there's a famous phrase. Can anyone shout how this famous quote ends? The definition of insanity. Yes, the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. This is what was happening every time I would go into that conference room going, well, my numbers are so great this time. I got it this time. But the way that I was presenting information was the same. And that's why I was going insane. And this is what I want to help prevent. And to do that, I went on a 3-year philosophical journey to find answers to this very deep metaphysical question. Why do bad things happen to good data? Okay, right, like we work really hard on our numbers. We verify them, they're statistically significant, we check them 3 times. What is happening? And the thing is, it's not about the data being good. I mean, that's a whole other topic, but that's not what we're talking about here. What I would find was a whole bunch of answers to this question, but the one I found at the root actually really surprised me. I'd like to introduce you to your audience's brain. Hello, brain. So believe it or not, everyone you're presenting to has one of these, and they actually all function in kind of the same way in how they absorb information, interpret it, remember it, and are motivated to take action on it. Different people's personalities and types, sure. but the way the brain functions is pretty similar. And because I didn't have this information, my presentations were failing two critical goals. The first was to maintain the attention of the audience. Gosh, don't we know how hard that is? How long before we start people checking their Instagram feeds and, all that stuff on the side? We know we've lost them. And the second is to be memorable enough so that when they're sitting at their desk later, they remember what you said and they're like, oh yeah, let me approve that budget for you. Let me make that decision that was important. And what we do as a result is we end up vomiting out piles and piles of numbers and tables and pie charts and bullet points and all these things. And we're wondering why our audiences are confused and overwhelmed and even argumentative. Okay, so this is actually what's happening, and it's about having a plan to prevent the giant data puke, as Avinash Kaushik says. So we're going to go through what I call the 3 pillars of presentation and enlightenment. These are 3 of the most practical, simple tools that you can use to create presentations that are dynamic, visually engaging, and inspiring of action, which is what we want. Now, super quick, talking Twitter. If you're interested in tweeting anything out, feel free to copy me on the tweet at Pica. And here's the conference hashtag. It's a bit of a mouthful, DigiMarCon Mid-Atlantic, but I'd love for you to hear any thoughts that resonate for you out there. All right, let's do it. So the very first pillar is called Be Your Audience. Okay, what do I mean by saying be your audience? Something really magical happens when we take ourselves out of our own shoes, our data analyzing shoes and lens and perspective, and we put ourselves in the shoes of the people that we're actually presenting to. Who are they? What's important to them? What's going on for them? How do they make decisions? Okay, we're not presenting at them, we're trying to engage with them. And that's a really essential mindset shift as we're coming to them in this service capacity to get them to do things that we want them to do. So your stakeholder, the words that are coming out of her mouth are, can you present some campaign results? And I don't know about you, but I used to get super vague requests like this all the time. Like, oh yeah, let me just push the campaign result button. But that's not what she's actually asking for, because when stakeholders go to stakeholder school, they don't often learn how to articulate what it is they actually need and how to connect that with your data. So this step is about asking, how can I connect, how can I take my data and translate it into the needs of what they want and how they make decisions? So you're gonna get in their head. You're gonna be like their therapist. Okay, you're gonna ask okay, what do I really need right now? Do I need financial stability, better market share, to lower my costs? What do they need? What's top of my mind? What are the biggest projects that I have, the biggest hairy goals? How am I compensated for my bonus? What are the ways that turn them into a success? What's keeping me up at night? Where is the big monkey on my back that I can't seem to get rid of? It's website problems, it's budget issues, it's internal red tape. How can your data help them overcome the obstacles that they're encountering in getting their job done? What would make me successful? Because when I'm successful as a stakeholder, we're all successful. That's how this process works. So how do they define that success? And if you're working in a customer-centric company, what would make my customers' lives better? And how can we create empathy for that so that they'll tie the customer's success to their own? This is a very vital inquiry that rarely do we go on before we start opening a PowerPoint and dropping in table and slide and bar chart and all of that. I know, because that's what I did, and this changed everything. So you may be familiar with this company. I don't know, it's like this little upstart, tiny little thing. No, it's TED. So obviously TED Talks are known for hosting the world's most innovative and engaging and inspiring talks in the world. And I discovered a tool from learning about TED Talks that I have found to be a game changer in business presentations. And it's called the through line. Every single TED Talk requires a through line in order for you to even apply. And the through line is defined as a connecting theme that ties together each narrative element in your presentation. In other words, it is your presentation summarized in a single sentence. Now let's think about some of the presentations we've done that have 50 different data points and all kinds of different kinds of sections and no real narrative thread that moves throughout. But this is what makes TED Talks so compelling. The clarity of what you're supposed to get from them is crystal clear, but that isn't what we're bringing often to these. So another way to think of the through line, I love this definition because when I'm brainstorming, this is what I think of. A strong cord or rope onto which you will attach all the elements that are part of the idea that you're building. So when you're going through your data and you know you have this QBR or this monthly readout, is there a single data that you're attaching all these numbers to? Does it hook on and belong there and support your overarching message? Or is it just there because it's nice to have and someone asked for it and it just adds to the noise rather than creating that signal and amplifying it? So TED Talks have very lofty and ingenuitive through lines. I didn't find them exactly practical for everyday business presentation. So I developed my own formula to be more appropriate for this. So the first thing, this is one sentence, maybe two, but think about this for one sentence. You start with what you're presenting about, okay? You're setting the stage. Then you're hinting that you found something interesting. This can create a conflict for the audience. Every great story includes a conflict. That is what data storytelling is supposed to be about. And the conflict can be an opportunity that's exciting and shows growth, or it can be a problem or an obstacle that is standing in the way of your success. But it's a conflict either way, because if they take no action, the conflict and the opportunity will disappear. And then finally, you hint at that you have a solution or a resolution. Okay, how are you going to solve this problem? So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of presentation through lines that I've used that not only helped create clarity and focus for my presentation, but they also were very clear for my audience when I presented. First one, our Q3 A/B testing netted a 16% gain in conversion rate and could continue to grow another 10% in Q4 with our new test recommendations. Notice that I've hinted at what actually happened and what we're talking about. I've shown an opportunity, but I haven't given the whole secret sauce away. I haven't shown everything that I have. I've created a sort of trailer for the presentation that makes people want to stay and keep paying attention. Our search marketing program efficiency declined during May. We found 3 reasons for why this may have happened and what to do about it. So you're not always presenting good news, right? We hate delivering bad news, but in my world, there's no such thing as bad news, just opportunities for improvement and keeping our jobs, because that's what we're meant to do. So you can frame that in the form of another conflict that is an opportunity. And finally, maybe you're trying to socialize a new platform or get people excited about a project. We'll show you how the capabilities of our new email marketing platform could dramatically increase our engagement rates. Aren't these meetings that maybe someone actually wants to come and listen to if these things are important to them? Because it's showing that there's an opportunity here. But oftentimes we don't put it in a way that's designed to trigger the brain and our emotions and our interests and attention. So that's going to help you start thinking about the real piece of clarity and the focus for your presentation. The next pillar that we have is about using your tools wisely. How we use our presentation tools is a critical juncture in this process, and it's so often where we can go very, very wrong. And I'm It's not speaking for a friend. So one of the ways that we use our tools is that sometimes we use it to create, someone who's like our wing person, our best buddy who's there to support us, to cheer us on, to help deliver our message. But then other times we use it and we'll create the equivalent of a Kanye West who climbs up on stage with you and steals your trophy and your thunder. And that's very often what's happening from a visual perspective. Now, what we all like to do is point the finger at PowerPoint. PowerPoint is evil, and it's the problem, and it's why this sucks, right? Except that, it's interesting. As PowerPoint became kind of the Kleenex of presentation tools, which it wasn't originally designed in neuroscience, by the way, we've been inundated with this horrible mess of really boring and kind of ugly and absolutely bizarre presentation slides. Yes, apparently a bunny and a hot dog are correlated in some way. I didn't make this up. And now PowerPoint became the problem. It's PowerPoint's fault. And now replace it with, it's a Keynote problem, and it's a Google Slides problem, and we're placing the blame everywhere else. But here's what I think. I think it's a people problem. As a global population of business professionals, we are categorically not equipped with the tools to understand how to present information visually. Now, the tools themselves, to our defense, they could do a little bit better job of corralling us to make sure we don't run amok like what we just saw. But we need more control. And because the tools don't actually implement that control, we have to learn how to control ourselves. So I'm going to give you a couple of design controls right now that are going to transform your presentations. The first, bullet points are killing your presentations. I'm talking about like the big blocks of sentence upon sentence, all shown at once here. And pop quiz, who in this room wants to see all this information presented like this? Can anyone guess? Oh no, one person does. And that's us, the presenter. Why? Because we read off of that information word for word to transmit the information, but we don't understand how this is actually interfering with them hearing us, because they read it word for word to themselves. I want you to think of an interesting, hopefully very disturbing analogy where just imagine for a second you're in your meeting and you decide to climb up on the conference room table and you trench coat flash everybody. So I know, it's great. And everyone's eyes are everywhere and you're still trying to talk to them, but it's over. You've completely lost their attention. And that's because bullet points expose all of your information to them at once, so they stop hearing you. I hope I've sufficiently disturbed you. This is the best I can do because this is so important. This is as risque as it will get. So what you want to think about, less trench coat flash, more striptease, okay? What do stripteases do? They reveal things bit by bit so that the attention is maintained. So it's easy for me to just stand up here and be like, just don't use them. But that's not fair. This is a huge habit that we have. So we have to ask why? Why do we love our bullet points so much? I think on the surface it's simple. We learned how we presented from everyone around us. But at the root of what's happening is that we use our slides to read off of as a crutch because we didn't prepare the information in advance. I can't tell you how many practitioners I've met and myself where the first time I practiced my presentation was during the meeting, and it was very obvious. And when you actually prepare and minimize the text on your slides, they're able to hear you. Now, you have to understand your slides are for your audience, not you. Yes, they can help keep the pace and help guide the conversation for you so you remember what the track is, but they are a mechanism to deliver your message in your audience's brain. It's so critical to remember that. They don't want you to read them. a bedtime story during this meeting, they can do that at home. They want you to talk to them and engage them. I learned this from this amazing book called Slideology by Nancy Duarte. And in it, she describes an incredible philosophy called create ideas, not slides. Put simple ideas, one idea on every slide, not a wall of text. In fact, you may want to create more than one slide for just one idea and split them across, and I'm going to show you that in a second, because that helps them absorb the information better. Now, this may mean taking one heavily bulleted slide and blowing it up into a collection and series of smaller and more digestible, I call them sliders, right? Little bites. And yeah, you're going to end up with a lot more slides because of it, but I guarantee no one will be counting them because each slide will be supporting the message you're giving in that exact moment. Now, this is a very challenging mindset to take on. So if you'd like a little bit of like a compromise, I developed something called the story point method, and you're welcome to visit that blog post at that URL there because it gives you a midpoint that you can work with. All right, a little bit of a pulse check. How's this landing for everybody? Everyone's like not gonna, no Kane's gonna pull me. Okay, great. All right. What this is really about is understanding simplicity and intention. Those are two of the most important principles that you can put in your presentations. And another way to do this is to do something called resisting the fluff, as hard as that might be. Cat people? Cat? Okay. Oh, okay. 2 people are not in denial, so that's great. So what do I mean by fluff? I mean any of the repetitive ancillary crap that we put on our slides, on every single slide, that don't actually communicate any information, and it's everywhere. So this is where branding departments like to pull out the pitchforks, but I'm talking about company logos on every slide, watermarks, every slide, giant page numbers, big bars on the bottom, decorative objects, and all other fluffy doodads that don't add any value. And the problem with all of this is that fluff is very distracting. It creates a lot of visual noise, so people can't hear you over all of that. That's how the brain works, so really critical to understand. These came from an awesome book from Gar Reynolds called Presentation Zen. If you haven't picked it up already, highly recommend it. And I want to make sure we're on good time, so I'm going to move fast. So let me just... Here, I'm going to go through a couple things here. Okay. One of the best books I've ever read in my life is called Brain Rules by John Medina. And he describes something really important. He said that vision is the human being's strongest sense because of survival. So our vision is directly tied to what is important and what matters to us. And as a result, powerful and relevant imagery actually increases the recall of information. Remember goal number 2? Adding images that are evocative and relevant actually increase that. So images also stir emotion. Do you think a pie chart is going to stir the same amount of emotion as seeing a customer or someone that's relevant to the audience struggling with something? No. That's why we should visually tell the customer's stories, not just through numbers. Storytelling activates more parts of the brain than any other thing that you can do, way more than data, as much as we love our data. So how do we do this? Well, we have one way of where I presented my conversion landing page results, where I was like, conversion results, people abandoned our capture form and our landing page sucked, and yeah. So why do we do this? I want you to imagine just for a second that you're watching Game of Thrones, and instead of this like exciting preview trailer thing coming on, they put up a PowerPoint slide with an executive summary of what the show is about. This is a TV show about dragons. There's a throne of dead people's swords, and sorry, spoiler, every character. Don't like anybody because they'll probably die by the end. Would this ever happen in the real world? No. But this is what we're doing in a setting where we're trying to engage people to create a transformation. And this is what we need to be alerted to. What if we used a photo of a customer, a potential customer who is struggling and showing that something is obviously not right? And that can be a great counterpoint to the very data-heavy stuff that we use. So when it comes to using images, I have great news. Your data is also imagery. And that brings us to our third pillar, which is maximize their data absorption. So one of the most important first steps in maximizing data absorption is choosing the appropriate visualization, okay? And this is not something that is easy to do, and it's something you can learn about. But once you choose that, the first thing we often do is drop our data in and add a lot of crap to it, or we don't remove enough crap to it. So I take every chart that I have through a detox. I'm kind of crunchy granola, so I like to do that. We might drop our data in here and like, oof, this is actually default format that you can find in certain tools, yikes. But you don't walk away after this. What you do is you can take your visualizations through a number of steps, and don't worry, I have a resource at the end if I can squeeze it in that will take you through this step by step. But we eliminate 3D. We remove the background, the border, the grid lines, the axes. We make the font more readable. We label the data directly. And notice what's different about this. It has one color, right? Doesn't it look like sad and boring and gosh, no one would like that? That's intentional because that gray background actually creates a neutral backdrop for our audience, because now we can use a strategic color to visually highlight and emphasize the data point that we want them to care about, okay? This is data. This is the story, because your eye looks right there immediately. Now, a lot of times what we do is we'll just put the name of the chart at the top of the slide in the title. Number of sales by channel. Boring. That is not a story. That's just what the chart is, but it's not telling the audience what it actually means. So we use that valuable real estate to take out what it is, and we put in an observation of our data that calls out what we want people to see in the chart. And this is called a McKinsey title, and it is vital to communicating and pushing the narrative through your presentation. Now notice what I put here. What is this? An ellipsis, right? An ellipsis has 3 important words: to be continued. This is designed to build anticipation and show you that something new is coming. Yeah, paid search was highest in sales, but look at email. Our conversion rate is off the chart. That's a more interesting story. And that creates an interesting story loop where I created some anticipation and now I've closed it. So that's it. I might have to take like a minute, but I just want to quickly recap the 3 pillars. First, be your audience, use your tools wisely, and maximize data absorption. So I have a free copy of the session handout. It's very printable. It's easy to print. If you like it, it's at leahpica.com DMC handout, or you can just grab it through a QR code. I'll give that a second or two. Okay, and then if you'd like to connect, I'll be out here for a few minutes, just right here. Come find me, say hello, or send me a LinkedIn connection invite with a note mentioning this. I get back to everyone who sends me a note, and I would just love to get you to know you better. And I want to leave you by saying, sorry, this one, the QR. There you go. Sorry, I know, time's up. All right, hopefully that works. Okay. And I want to leave you with this quote, that facts do not cease to exist just because they are ignored. And that's a nice quote, but I think getting ignored sucks. So I hope today I've provided just a couple of tools for figuring out how to not get ignored with your valuable insights and help them inspire change. So please, with that, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of the conference and visit responsibly, my friends. Thank you. Namaste.
Yeah.